Hello and welcome to the next lesson where we'll discuss the cameras in Corona and V-Ray. As always, on the right hand side I have a Corona file and on the left hand side I have a V-Ray file. To create a camera in Corona, we need to go to Cameras and choose Standard. And we can find Corona Cam here. And we simply create it in the viewport. We can align the target with the camera by using the Align Selection option. Anyway, the procedure in V-Ray is pretty similar. We just need to choose V-Ray from the list and then V-Ray Physical Camera, and create it to the same way as in Corona. Now, let's go to the settings. We can turn off the target here, and we can control the distance of the target by changing this value. In V-Ray, we can uncheck the targeted option and the target will disappear. Here we can change the focus distance, and here we can change the target distance as in Corona. We can choose Show Horizon Line if we want to see the horizon in the camera view. We can do the same in Corona. It's the Horizon Line option here. We can decide how we want to preview the cone. Now we have When selected. We can choose Never or Always as well. Similarly in V-Ray, by default it's selected, but we can also choose Never or Always. Film gate in V-Ray is the film width in Corona. We can choose between field of view and focal length. And in V-Ray, we can change field of view as well, or focal length here. Let's say 24, and the same here. We can also have a zoom factor. And the same name in V-Ray. Now click on the aperture and here we can change ISO, f-number and shutter speed. In Corona, we can change it here. ISO, f-stop is the same as f-number, and shutter speed. Let's scroll down. Here, we can turn on depth of field and motion blur effect in the V-Ray camera, and we can control the results by changing these values. While in Corona, we can turn on motion blur by choosing if we want to have motion blur due to the camera movement or due to the geometry. So to have complete motion blur, we need to have both options checked. Now here we can enable the depth of field. And if we will leave this as it is, the depth of field focus will be created based on the camera we created, so the position of the target is. But we can override focus as well, and this is a pretty cool option. So we can override the value, so the distance from the camera. In V-Ray, we can control it by changing the focus distance value or by manual positioning of the target. In Corona, we additionally can also pick the object that we want to have in full focus. So now we'll have the focus here. Okay, now let me show you the tilt and shift options. I create a box, so you can see the actual results. So in general, if you move the target higher than the camera is, we'll create an impression that the vertical lines are falling, because they aren't in one line. And if you want to have these vertical lines perfectly straight, we can use these options. So we can turn on automatic vertical tilt. Okay, and in Corona, we of course also have this option. It's named exactly the same. Here we go. We can also manually change tilt and shift if we need to by changing these values. The same in V-Ray. So we have the global exposure selected. So changing values here will not affect the output render in terms of the exposure. Let me show you. Let's add the Corona sky to the environment tab. So we can set the settings related to the exposure, brightness of the image in the light mix. And when we change f-stop, for instance, the exposure of the image won't be affected, while in real life, it is. So no matter if we change f-stop, ISO or shutter speed, the render stays the same. Okay, let's do the same for V-Ray. Let's add V-Ray Sky. Let's start rendering and let's go back to camera settings. In V-Ray, we have physical exposure set up by default, and when we change the settings of the camera, it will affect the exposure of the render. If you want to have the same effect as I've shown you in Corona, you need to change it to exposure value. And you can set up the exposure value you want. So you can see that in exposure stays the same, when if I'm changing the values now. When we add exposure layer in the frame buffer, we can control the exposure from here as well. Okay, so that's everything I want to show you, so you'll be able to easily follow the lessons. See you in the next one.